Elections Commissions on March 12th sent out a letter, and they state municipalities shall not use the special voting deputy process. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a process, it's a law, 6.875. What they're saying here is they're telling municipalities to not follow the law. Coincidentally, they say it's because special voting deputies are considered non-essential. And I did an open records request and said, how did you come to the determination that special voting deputies are non-essential? And they basically just referenced me back to this letter, and by implication stating, well, we just decided so. That's the best I can understand. And they made this decision on March 12th because they believed it was not feasible to implement any type of screening process prior to the spring election. We're talking spring. This goes on and on and on. While I'm there, I received these documents. I took them back to our office and I examined them. And what was concerning about the application for absentee ballots is that there's a certification in there. There's a certification people have to make whether they're indefinitely confined. That certification, if made falsely, has penalties of they're criminal. Possible fine, jail, or both. What I saw and was able to document is these applications were pre-filled out for the residents, and the certification was either checked before and sometimes after the resident put their signature on this document. And some of these family members are here today to tell you they do not believe their loved ones had the cognitive ability to understand that document. Furthermore, there's voter envelopes that contain the ballot. Can't stress it enough. We don't know how the ballots were executed, who they voted for. We don't care. We do care that the process, which is called the law, was not followed. And these voting envelopes were executed by the staff of the facilities, which is explicitly prohibited by the statute. Furthermore, I learned that there are multiple letters from the WEC which correspond to open records meetings that they had. So later in my investigation, I went and I watched those open meetings and found some very relevant material. This is an example of an application for absentee ballot. It's all pre-filled out. The signature was there. Here's the certification for being indefinitely confined, which states if you do this and it's not true, you face a $1,000 fine, 6 months in jail, or both. There were times it was pre-filled out. There were times that the voting clerks at the village hall checked this box, which if you do inappropriately, you can be put in jail. So now I had to dive into the law. As a criminal prosecutor, as a criminal investigator, we normally deal with Chapter 940, crimes against persons, Chapter 943, crimes against property, 961 is drugs. We don't deal with Chapter 6. All right, I'm in new water here. But I do my research, and I find 6.84, and it's the legislative policy of voting in person versus absentee voting. And the legislature passed this. So that means Democrats and Republicans came together. Presumably it was approved by a governor. And they stated they were concerned about fraud or abuse, overzealous solicitation of absentee voting, and or undue influence. And that's what these family members are here today because they have concern that that happened to their loved ones. This is really the meat and potatoes. 6.875, and later we're going to see 12.13. Okay, these two statutes work hand in hand. I know we're getting a little deep here with the law, but this is so very important. Realize the words shall, when you read a statute, isn't maybe, isn't if you feel like it, isn't if you have time. The word shall is you must. Realize no or shall not means just that. It is a definitive statement. Chapter 6.875, can be a little complicated. There's different parts to it, but I just brought some of the main parts, the tip of the iceberg here, out on this slide. This statute is the exclusive means of absentee voting. Very important, a couple down there. No employee past 2 years may be an SVD. No employee may do this. The SVDs shall witness the vote, and the SVDs may assist. No individual other than an SVD or a relative may assist the voter. That means the staff at the facility absolutely, positively cannot, by this law, assist in the execution of the vote. Now, I have to give the Wisconsin Elections Commission, this is kind of their theory. This is the pony that they're running. I will let you know that the governor's office told them at the beginning of this process they can't do this. I will tell you that the Legislative Council at the end of this process, which is highlighted in the timeline, told them what you're doing is not legal, not appropriate. You can't do it. But it was the theory of the WEC to use the back end of this statute kind of as like a loophole. And they theorized that 6.875 sub 6 sub E gave them a little leeway. And that statute holds that if the special voting deputies make 2 attempts to get the elector to vote and they're unsuccessful, the ballot shall then be mailed to the voter. But the problem the SVD has, the Wisconsin Election Commission has, is they decided to never even bother to try to send the special voting deputies. They had inconsistent positions where at times they said, the SVDs are never going to be let in. At times they said the special voting deputies will only be let in occasionally. At times they said there will be no uniformity about how many special voting deputies are let in, how many are not let in, so we should just do it this way and just mail it. Forget the statute, forget all the shalls, forget the shall nots, just mail it and tell the employees at the facility, yeah, you can help them. You can help them and these people vote. That's what the WEC decided in contrast to the law, in contrast to the advice of the governor's office, in contrast to the Legislative Council, and in contrast to the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution clearly states that the only body that can create or change elections laws is the legislature of the state. We have 3 branches of government. The governor is in the executive branch. He is not in the legislature. The governor said, I can't change this law. His office did, at least, his chief legal counsel. Yet an agency of the executive branch, an agency of the governor, said, nah, we'll do it. We'll do it on our own, against the law. So during the course of our investigation, myself and my colleagues went to Ridgewood, and we talked to the people who were employed there. I had the executive director tell me exactly what he told Judy, that he hoped his staff would be honest. The recreational therapy director actually told me if a resident could only point at the ballot, that's what the employee of the facility would mark. If all they could do was point, the employee would mark wherever I guess they pointed. The activities aide, she was a young lady, 18 years of age at the time, certainly not considered subject matter experts like the WEC is supposed to be. She was informed if these residents didn't want to vote right then and there, if they didn't have mental clarity, she was instructed, point them at the TV, turn on the news, and come back in a day or two and see if they were lucid enough to vote. That is literally the advice that she got, taking advantage of the loved ones of these people that we have sitting here, and others. Furthermore, these ballots, when they weren't executed, were floating around the facility, unsealed, in the ballot envelope, just floating around the facility. And remember, the law states only SVDs are to receive the ballot, and they are to maintain the possession of the ballot. I further interviewed the individuals, let me go back one, about the procedure that they use to have people vote. The ballot envelope has a 5-step process. Step number 1 is very, very simple. Have the person vote, put the ballot in the envelope, seal the envelope. I was informed by the employees that either A, the resident would vote, they drop the ballot in the envelope, they wouldn't seal it, or the resident would not vote. And they would take that unmarked ballot, it would float around the facility for a couple days, and then they would try to get that resident to vote again. Either way, the ballot envelope would remain unsealed until they eventually delivered it to a higher level employee who then sealed them all up and then mailed them back to Mount Pleasant. Meaning that there was no, what we would call in law enforcement, satisfactory chain of custody, and these ballots are just floating about. This is an example of a ballot envelope. Here's the 5-step process, not very difficult to figure out. Step 1, place your voted ballot inside the envelope and seal it. Do not use tape or glue. I don't necessarily blame these employees. They weren't trained, and they were asked to do tasks that they shouldn't have to do. So, I developed a spreadsheet. There's 48 residents who voted, and I knew from Judy that she believed her mother did not have the mental capacity, because of her cognitive issues, to request a ballot and to exercise her right to vote. And people have a right to vote. We don't want to stifle any voting. People have a right to vote. But we were concerned that people were being taken advantage of. So I contacted those 48 families. I contacted their contact person, and I told them, I hope and pray that your loved one is of sound mind, of sound body. But if they do have cognitive difficulties, tell me, please, if you want to share that. And I had 7 families who informed me that their loved one, in their opinion, didn't have the cognitive ability to request a ballot or to exercise their right to vote. I'm not going to go into each and every one. There's a couple slides here. You'll be able to look at that later. But what else is also interesting is that I went to My Vote Wisconsin and I checked out these individuals' voting history. And almost all of them hadn't voted since 2012 or voted maybe just once. If you look at the first one, OF, there is no record of OF voting in any other election. You look at the next to the right there, the daughter of that individual said her dad was only interested in Doritos and Snickers, and he had not voted in any other election since 2012. Going to the next 3, once again, no real history of voting, and you can review this later. Going to the next 2, no real issue of voting. If you look at the very last one, BH would ask her own son, "Who are you?" She couldn't even recognize her own son, and she happened to vote in 2 elections in 2020, but no other elections. So once again, I'm kind of learning this throughout my investigation, so I had asked myself, what is the Wisconsin Election Commission? This is them. As the sheriff mentioned, there's 6 members. 3 are appointed by Democrats, 3 are appointed by Republicans. Coincidentally, 2 of them are attorneys also, and they had very strange and suspect legal opinions in this matter. Now the timeline. The timeline of this whole situation is very interesting. And the timeline is also here. You'll get your own copies of it. But March 10th, 2020, COVID is of grave concern, and the Wisconsin Election Commission writes a letter that's signed by a variety of the commissioners. They write a letter stating we need to suspend the special voting deputy law. They might even call it a program at sometimes. I don't really understand it. It's a law. There's also something with polling places. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. But what's interesting is the governor's office tells the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which is an agency under the governor does not have the power to suspend parts of Wisconsin's voting law even during an emergency. The governor can't do it. So on March 12, 2020, the governor enacts Executive Order number 72, which is basically when he shut down the state for COVID. That same day, just hours after that order comes down, the Wisconsin Elections Commission figures out how to use technology to have a virtual meeting where they all meet from different parts of the state. It's a Zoom call, and they decide they're going to issue that directive, that letter I showed you before, which tells each municipality throughout every county in the state of Wisconsin not to follow the special voting deputy law, which is Wisconsin State Statute 6.875. They direct that the special voting deputies shall not be sent to facilities. Commissioner Knudsen even states, and I will preface this, he was talking about the polling places, but he even states that we need the flexibility to not follow the law. They flat out say it in their meeting. They need the flexibility to not follow the law. You know, the sheriff and I talked about this a little bit. COVID is serious. It's scary. We get it. Right at the beginning, when the state shut down, we kind of call it our hair on fire moment. Everybody was freaking out. They're scared. They have grave concerns. We understand. Some drastic decisions were made. Well, you know what? Time marches on. And it marches on to May 26, 2020, when the Safer at Home order expires. Not only does the WEC not have the authority to do what they did in an emergency, they certainly do not have the power to do what they did when the emergency order has completely expired. There's nothing out there anymore whatsoever. They convene a meeting, that being the Wisconsin Elections Commission, on June 24th, 2020, citing no legal authority, they decide to extend the suspension of the special voting deputy program, which is a law. Commissioner Knudsen literally states, we need to go back to following the law, but not for SVDs. Commissioner Spindell states he's concerned with fraud in nursing homes and suggests, why don't we send the SVDs in? We can use PPEs, we can take appropriate precautions. And at one point, Commissioner Spindell, because he's from Milwaukee, states that he literally has hundreds of ballots floating around residential care facilities. Hundreds of ballots unsecure, just in his area. And there's 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin. Nonetheless, at this meeting, the WEC votes 5-1. Spindell votes against it, 5-1, to suspend the special voting deputy law. Moving forward, they have a meeting set for September 16th. It's my understanding that they actually hold the meeting on September 25th. Nonetheless, one thing on their agenda is to discuss what are we doing with these special voting deputies, and basically should we be doing it. Spindell, once again, comes forward and asks, the law states we're supposed to do something, we're not doing it, where does that power come from? And nobody really answers that question because it can't be answered. He further suggests using technology to facilitate the vote. Remember, every meeting the Wisconsin Elections Commission had, starting from March 12th on, was done via Zoom. Every meeting, within hours, they could figure out how to meet using technology, but the thought of using it to actually make the law work with special voting deputies eluded them. Commissioner Knudsen states, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, but we should not follow this law during this pandemic. Chair Jacobson, at the bottom there, she states that she's trying to interpret the state law, special voting deputies, 6.875, with other laws or rulings of the health department. Well, there is no other law. There's 6.875 and nothing else. There's no, at one point she says she's trying to interpret these two laws so they can exist in harmony. There are no two laws. There's one law, the special voting deputy law, and it says special voting deputies are to be utilized, and staff shall not be utilized. It is clear. This is actually the letter that is sent after that September meeting. And it states, this is sent to all care facilities, and it's blown up right here. It says how to assist the voter in filling out their absentee ballots. This is sent to residential care facilities, basically nursing homes. And they're instructing the employees of the nursing homes who explicitly cannot assist in the vote. They say, if a voter requests assistance, you may read the ballot, including candidates' names, party affiliations, and ballot instructions to the voter, or mark the ballot as directed by the voter. Believe it or not, that is the completion of the crime right there. Crimes throughout the state, all 72 counties, every nursing home, resident care facility right there. That, according to 12.13, which we're going to get into, that is a violation of state law. Continuing with our timeline. We're actually into 2021. The presidential election has come and gone. We don't care how people vote. We do care that the laws of the state of Wisconsin were not followed by the government of the state of Wisconsin. But we're all the way into January of 2021 with no legal ability, citing no law. The Wisconsin Elections Commission, on a 5-1 vote, again votes to suspend following this law. And Commissioner Knudsen, it's kind of interesting here, and I call it the evolution of their thought process. At first, everyone's on board. Yeah, I don't follow the law, it's a program. Okay? Now it appears that he's starting to figure it out to some degree, and I'm being respectful because I'm just reading his quotes, but he literally states, we're telling the clerks to break the law. He goes on to state that we're the ones directing them to break the law. He suggests, he's on board with Commissioner Spindell now, maybe we should use technology so all of the policies as required by law are being followed. He further states, this is kind of my position, the SVD law is a law. Prohibitions on visitors in nursing homes was a guidance, a directive. There is no other law. This here is the bookend. There's two bookends. This timeline starts with the governor's office saying to the Wisconsin Elections Commission, you can't do this. We don't have the power to suspend the law even during an emergency. They do it for whatever it is, 10 months. They do it through multiple elections. Every time they advise municipalities falsely, we're going to find out that's a violation of law. But finally, the Legislative Council comes forward. And there's also a committee for the review of administrative rules. And it is stated that state law does not empower the WEC to waive the special voting deputies, nor does this law contain an exemption for a pandemic. It's not necessarily Sergeant Llewell saying they're breaking the law. It's not necessarily the sheriff's office saying they're breaking the law. It is the governor's office saying they can't do this. It's the Legislative Council saying they can't do this. And it's the Joint Committee for the Review of Administrative Rules that is telling the Wisconsin Elections Commission they are giving illegal advice. I should say that the Joint Committee for the Review of Administrative Rules also notifies the Wisconsin Elections Commission you have to go through the formal process of promulgating or writing an emergency rule, and if you can't do that, you must cease issuing these directives. On March 2nd, 2021, the Wisconsin Elections Commission has another meeting that you can view, all these meetings you can view online, and they basically acknowledge that we're not going to be able to go through this process to formally issue an emergency rule, and they decide we're going to cease issuing this directive. They attempt to allege that they did nothing wrong, and I guess that's where we don't really agree. So, one of their positions is that no one could get into residential care facilities. And that position changed. Sometimes SVDs could get in, other times maybe they couldn't. So what I did is I pulled the visitation logs for the Ridgewood Care Center from March 13th, the day after the order came out from the governor, Executive Order 72, and the day after the Wisconsin Election Commission issued their first ruling saying don't use special voting deputies.
This is 2020?
This is 2020, yes, sir. So it's March 13th, 2020 through the end of November 2020. In that time frame, you're going to see that 899, just call them 900 civilian visitors entered that facility, and 333 employees were in and out of that facility. Let's look at who those visitors were. Those visitors included the Orkin man, they included laundry repair, elevator repair, the vendor, job interviews, just interviewing for a job. You can do that anywhere. They included instructors with students. They included the fish cleaning guy 11 times. They included the person who cleaned the bird cage. We have clean bird cage 3 times, copier, even DoorDash. Those people were allowed in to the Ridgewood Care Facility, but heaven forbid we make an exception for special voting deputies or use technology. You know, one of the main jobs of an investigator is to talk to people. And today I talked to Judy. And she informed me that she was allowed to visit her mother in some type of enclosed plexiglass. I kind of envisioned like a phone booth from back in the day. So they could facilitate visitation between Judy and her mother through putting up partitions, but they can never come to the thought process that maybe we could do this to follow the law. So I told you 6.875, now we're going to hit 12.13. I don't name statutes. The legislature comes together, passes law, and names statutes. It just so happened this statute is called election fraud. We're stating that the rules weren't followed. We're stating that the integrity of the vote was put into question. The legislature has a law called election fraud. And there's a variety of different ways to violate this statute, but the first one, in my opinion, fits. In the course of a person's official duties or on account of the person's official position, intentionally violate or intentionally cause any other person to violate any provisions of chapters 5 through 12 for which there's no penalty listed. And it just so happens that the penalty for violating this statute is a Class I felony. It's a felony. I don't make the rules. This is what the legislature has decided. The 3 violations beneath are misdemeanors. Realize this. These laws aren't broken. Let me say it a different way. The government doesn't have to prove that their loved ones were taken advantage of. That's not the law that we're alleging was violated. It is violated when the proper procedures are not followed. And that is clearly what has happened here. I'm not going to go through all of these clips, but I actually took time to include some of the statements that blew my mind, where they basically just admitted to breaking the law. I'm going to play 2 clips. They're roughly 20, 30 seconds apiece. This is Knudsen, Commissioner Knudsen, and I kind of referenced what he was saying before, but literally I want you to hear it from the commissioners. Oh, hold on a second.
I have had discomfort, and I expressed it publicly the day that I had first suggested this, that we will be essentially telling the clerks to break the law. And over the ensuing months since, I first wrote to the governor about my concern about the effect of the COVID virus in the elderly back in mid-March of last year, so it's 10 months ago now. Is there some other way that we can accomplish the same thing, to make this guidance rather than us, formally directing them not to do it?
Next clip, last clip. You can watch the other ones just on your own time. This is just for brevity.
Earlier it was said that we were trying to reconcile 2 conflicting laws. I've never really looked at that. The SVD law is a law. Some of the prohibitions on visitors to nursing homes, in the early days of the pandemic, it came down from the centers for Medicaid and Medicare that it was a guidance, a directive. It wasn't clear whether it actually carried the force of law. Later, the governor had 60 days. That ended. The DHS has been operating under certain emergency powers. Certainly not clear that it's a law. But the law does say that SVDs should go in.
So where do we go from here? This is why we have a sheriff. He's going to speak on that. I would note that we set up a special telephone number. I set up a special email account. Please share that. People have questions or concerns. I am a resource, and I'm going to turn it back over to the sheriff. Thank you.
That's a lot of information, obviously, and obviously we went through this dozens and dozens of times, and I know most of you in this room have heard it for the first time, and a lot of new words, SVDs and the WEC, but part of our job too is education, and the good question here, the best question I think we're going to take away is where do we go from here? We're just one of 72 counties, Racine County. Ridgewood is one of 11 type facilities within our county. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of these facilities throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. We would be foolish to think for a moment that this integrity issue, this violation of the statute occurred to just a small group of people at one care facility in one county in the entire state. I would submit to you that this needs the Attorney General's attention. I would submit to you the Attorney General should launch an immediate investigation into the Wisconsin Elections Commission and the harm that they have done to all of these individuals and restore some level of integrity and trust back into our election system. As I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, at the end of the day, we all want to have fair elections. We all want to make certain that our vote counts. And when people break the law, we all want them held accountable. So with that said, I'll entertain questions you may have.
Sheriff, based on your authority, are you planning to refer any charges from anyone at that facility?
As I mentioned at the beginning, as we do in all criminal investigations, we investigate. We are the fact finders. We put all those investigative reports together, and they will be forwarded to our district attorney for her review and ultimate charging decision.
Have they been sent to the Tricia yet?
We are in a process.
Gotcha. Has anyone been arrested at all throughout all this?
We have not taken anybody into custody.
What about the other nursing homes in your county?
Again, this is the only the only facility that has come forward so far. But my suspicion is, this is the first time we have gone public with our information, is that we're going to get complaints. And not just here in Racine County. My suspicion is that you're going to see, you've seen Sergeant Llewell outline, this directive was given to all of the 72 counties. I have to believe that this is going to take place in every county across our state.
And if I can just add to that, the unfortunate consequence of not following the law is having people victimized. But the crime is not necessarily having these people victimized. The crime, according to the statute, is the Wisconsin Election Commission telling other officials of the vote to not follow the law. That's the crime. So the crime is completed throughout the state. It's already done. By their letters, by their directives, they have committed crime after crime after crime in all 72 counties throughout the state. The fact that it leads to victimization is a horrible end result. That's bad. But the crime's already done.
Can you speak to what the crime would be at you showed the statute of somebody who misleads a voter.
Yeah,
WC was it a crime of directing another to direct someone incorrectly? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's going to be at the bottom of your timeline here. There's 4 statutes right there. I would submit that the first statute, which is basically telling other voting officials not to follow the law or what they're supposed to be doing. I'm paraphrasing here, of course. That is a crime in and of itself. The fact that the employees then did things like receive a ballot when they're not supposed to, offer assistance when they're not supposed to, I would submit that they're somewhat of a party to that violation. But the first one, I would submit they committed directly.
That's the first one under Chapter 12?
Well, it's the first one I listed, so it's technically 12.13 sub 2 sub B as in boy sub 7.
The legislature is debating this, as I'm sure you guys know, as we speak. their reviews as well. A lot of this is legislative function, right? What is your role in this investigation? Is it just to urge the AG to get involved or the legislature to make fixes as opposed to any potential criminal charges?
I would submit to you that our role, as I mentioned earlier, is to shed light on the WEC. This isn't a Racine County issue. This is an entire state of Wisconsin issue about the Wisconsin Elections Commission, who knowingly, and they are the subject matter experts. Now, we talk about the folks that work at Ridgewood. Sergeant Will talked about some 18-year-old girl. They're not the subject matter experts, and I'm not suggesting that they're not, involved in this, but they're just going off of what they were told by people who are supposed to know the law and people that discussed openly. You heard them talk about how they're going to violate the law. So the purpose of this is to shed light on what I believe is a statewide problem. There's clear violations of the law. You don't need to be a lawyer to recognize and read what happened here. And this really ought to grab the Attorney General's opinion of the state of Wisconsin.
Do you want anyone charged from the facility?
I want to see our election process restored and show that we have integrity in our process and that we know that every one of our votes count.
And if I can add to that, I was a criminal investigator. My job, we receive an allegation, I investigate it and find out if there's any there. It's not necessarily my job to say how we're going to fix this, where it goes after I submit my reports. Our position is quite simple. I receive an assignment, I investigated it to its logical conclusion, and we are telling the public what we found. We are not urging votes to be overturned. We're not urging elections to be overturned. We don't even urge charges. We work collaboratively with prosecutors and try to come to the best results. But ultimately, charging is in the hands of whatever prosecutor, be it county or state. What is going to happen to the WEC is up to the legislature. We've discussed, we call on Democrats and Republicans. They appoint these commissioners, the majority of which, 5-1 votes, are telling people throughout the state of Wisconsin to not follow the law. I believe that's problematic.
But what do you say the DA, having the DA had this complaint 10 months ago or more, and didn't file charges?
No, what the DA did was received a complaint, an affidavit, and basically said, go figure this out. Then I was assigned to do the investigation. I certainly discuss matters with the DA's office. We have a wonderful working relationship. We really haven't formally submitted it for charging or anything like that. What I did do is uncover all this. We've had discussions, but it is so complicated that I've been doing this for 10 months, and it's going to take more time.
And just hang on a second, I'm going to finish this. So our district attorney's office, it's not uncommon for her to get a complaint and then send it to a respective law enforcement agency for follow-up and investigation. And that's exactly what it took here.
Can you show why Racine County and not Mount Pleasant took it? Or did she just pick whichever one she, I don't mean to sound rude, but why was Racine County assigned to Ridgewood instead of Mount Pleasant, please?
That would be a question you would have to ask the district attorney. But my suspicion is that, when it's happening at one facility, I suspect she thought it was probably happening in multiple jurisdictions within Racine County, and I have authority throughout the entire county. So, but again, I'm not the district attorney's spokesperson.
Are you recommending?
How about you, sir? You've been waiting patiently. Thank you.
Sheriff, and thank you, Sergeant, for all of this work. Can't imagine what this must have been like the last 10 months. And thank you to the families who are here who showed the courage. I have 2 or 3 real quick questions. They're basically yes or no. Have you started working with any of the other 71 sheriffs and the DAs and the clerks in those counties? Or are you at liberty to say?
I have not, but I can tell you that I fully expect that after our press conference here today, now that it's been gone public, that this is going to be something that the other 71 sheriffs and other law enforcement municipalities are most likely going to be fielding a fair number of calls.
Thank you. 2 quick follow-ups. Sergeant, do you have what you're going to share with us in a paper format as well as a digital format? How will we get those?
We have thumb drives, and that's the way we're going to dispense them.
Okay.
Yes, and if we run out, my captain's a little more savvy, we might do a Dropbox.
And then the last quick question that I have, and I can see you afterwards, through open records with the city of Racine and Racine County and the mayor's office, and I'll show this to you afterwards because I don't want you to comment on something you haven't seen. We have some very disturbing connections between some of the things that you shared today with the mayor's office, with the clerk's office, that I'd like to show you afterwards. Perhaps you already have them as part of your investigation, but I think it will complement what you're trying to get done today on election integrity. Thank you.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. We've answered a number of questions already. Out of respect for the families that are here today, we are a little over an hour here into this conference. What we will do is after we escort the families out, the sergeant and I will certainly entertain additional questions that you have, okay? So thank you for your patience.
Sir, can I just quickly, I know none of you.
They have no interest in talking. I've already discussed that. So please respect that.
On behalf of them, no. Is it fair to say that of the 7 families you identified, that they did not want their loved ones to vote? Is that a fair characterization?
So it's 8 total. It's Judy's mother Shirley, and then 7 additional. And I want to be very careful here. People have a right to vote. People have varying degrees of understanding, and I get that. And people who, you don't need a PhD to vote, all right? But these loved ones believe their loved ones had such cognitive difficulties that they would not have had the ability to request a ballot and exercise their right to vote. And I think when you look at those slides that I kind of went through a little bit quickly, there's people who can't recognize their own sons and daughters. There's people, once again, who can't remember what they ate. There's people who are only interested in Doritos and Snickers. There's people who won't sign any other type of legal documents. And there's one woman, OF I'm thinking of, it's the first one. Her daughter told me that she would have to fight with her mother to get her sign any type of necessary document. And she said, oh no way, there's no way my mother would have done that. And she was very adamant and very offended that someone did that to her mother. So that is not the crime per se, but that is the unfortunate result of having a government not following their own laws.
When you say they were being preyed on, where does
I
the
never
blame
said
lie
prayed.
for,
I never said prayed.
for taking advantage of the elderly?
I never said prayed.
All right, we can go back to the.
Okay, I'm going to go back with what I said, so we're going to, out of respect for the families that are here, we're going to go ahead and escort them out now. So please hold off any questions. Folks, thank you again so much for being brave.
Thank you. Yeah, it might be easier this way. That's it.
Oh, should be
Perfect.
Again, just watch yourself at the cables.
Yep.
Guys, if you want to tell me just what news channel you're with, I'll give you a little bit. Who's the reporter?
He's right.
I have it now. Okay, thank you. I'll just start with my name. It's terrible. I guess, okay. Ricardo Torres. Thank you.
And just so you know, on that thumb drive is obviously the PowerPoint, the timeline, and actually it's the redacted version of the reports, approximately about 65 pages. And there are more details in the reports. This is a summary, and this is a summary of a summary. Okay, there's a lot of detail there.
You mentioned you talked to like 28 or 38 families. Can we just assume that the 8 that didn't come forward said, no, mom's fine, mom can vote?
I'll wait for the sheriff, but yeah, I did. I certainly, and I started the conversation. I think I said my initial remarks that I hope that people have strong mental function, and I certainly did have people say, no, Dad was great, Mom was great. Yep.
So it was 40.
Can we just wait for the sheriff?
Yeah, there's 48 total families that you contacted?
I attempted. I didn't get in contact with everybody.
And 8 of them, 7, but then you added the 8, so 8 of 48 or whatever.
Of the ones I could reach, I didn't reach everyone, but I attempted.
But 8 of them got back.
I think the slide said 42, it is 48,
Let me double check for you. If it said 42, it should be 42.
whatever the slide said.
Yeah. I think you're right. It is 42.
It said 42 on the
Yep.
slide.
Let's do. Hey, just so everyone's clear, it's 42, not 48. 42 families.
Scroll down.
So 8 of 42.
Yeah. We all took our jobs because we're not mathematicians.
There's not a single math break.
So are you guys now going to continue this process in other homes, or is it now kind of?
We'll wait for the sheriff to come back, okay? I know you guys are antsy, and I wish he was here too. I see the captain just walked out, so hopefully But when you run the organization, you set the timeline. It's kind of like when I was in court, the judge is never late.
How long have you been with the sheriff's office? After?
2 years and change.
Oh.
Yeah, 2.5 maybe. But I was with the law enforcement agency before that, and then with the DA's office before
What
that.
at? With the.
Oak Creek Police Department.
Oh.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 21 years.
Okay.
They had a couple questions, I just told them to just wait.
Oh, no, certainly. Thank you for your patience.
Were any of the 8 determined by a judge or courts to not have that cognitive ability?
Right, there is an official ruling a court can make where then someone cannot legally vote. It was my understanding that only one of them has a legal representative, and that legal representative told me that that finding was made on that individual, and that individual still did vote. The other individuals did not, so now we're down to 7 of the 8, did not have that official legal finding, and that's why I'm not saying that them voting was necessarily a crime. What I am saying is their loved ones believed that that elderly resident was taken advantage of, and they thought that was inappropriate.
Sheriff, during this news conference, former President Trump put out a statement about this news conference. Just curious, have you talked to anyone on his team or Speaker Boss or anyone in Michael Gable's office as your review went on over the past couple months?
No, and as I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, I'm not affiliated with any other investigation that's going on. My knowledge of those investigations is probably as much as you know in terms of what the news media has told me and what I've read in the newspaper. This is an investigation that, as I mentioned again at the onset, this isn't something we went out to seek and look for and find people like Judy to come forward. This came to us. And as the sheriff, it is my job to investigate crime that occur within the county. And that is exactly what I did. And these are the findings. And it's not my decision to decide who gets charged, if anybody, but I know one thing. As a citizen of this state, of this country, I want to see our election process fixed. I want to see that the laws are followed, and I want to make certain that my vote and your vote counts. That's all I'd like to see come out of this. It's best to say this again. I'm not looking to overturn some election. I'm not looking to overturn a single vote. I just want to draw attention to a clear violation of state law, and I want to see that repaired. I want to see the people who violated held accountable, and it doesn't happen again.
Are you asking for the Wisconsin Election Commission? Are you recommending charges on any individual members for the commission?
As I mentioned again, my job in law enforcement, our job in the investigation is to find the facts, collect those facts, document those facts, present them to our district attorney for her review and ultimate charging decision. She can work with the Attorney General's office, I presume, perhaps to launch an investigation throughout the state, depending upon when all the folks watch this presentation and start thinking about their loved ones in these residential care facilities. But when we think about it, and I know that Sergeant Llewellyn has said this, but we keep talking about the end result, Judy and her mom and all the rest, but when we really think about it, we have a Wisconsin Elections Commission who failed to follow the law. Everything else that happened at is sort of the unfortunate result. We need to start at the top where this occurred.
That's why I asked.
Exactly, but that is not my decision, sir. It's not my decision.
Clarify, so where are we? I think I heard you say you have not officially referred the cases to the district attorney, just procedurally walk me through.
Right, we've had conversations, extensive conversations with the district attorney and one of her talented assistant DAs. We haven't officially sent any paperwork over. I just think this case is so detailed, so complex, and quite honestly, this is a state level case. This case is more adequately investigated at the state level. When you have crimes occurring throughout the state of Wisconsin, all 72 counties, yes, we have our little slice of the pie here, and maybe we can deal with it. But why this wouldn't be dealt with at the state level, be it the Attorney General's office, be it the Division of Criminal Investigation, is beyond me. And I understand that people above my pay grade ultimately make those decisions, but I think we're doing a lot of great work here, a lot of hard work here, but somebody else should start doing some of the heavy lifting also.
Can you speak to why the press conference and what kind of, again, I don't want to say ended with kind of middle of the investigation as more investigations continue?
I respect your opinion, and I think this is a natural stopping point of the investigation. To answer your question, are we going to look for more people who have been taken advantage of? We could, but you really got to focus on, and we've said this a couple times, the law was broken with the advice of the WEC to not follow the law. That is the problem. We can find more unfortunate victims, if you will, or results of that, but that's kind of why we can stop here and take a pause, because according to the law that the legislature writes, which is called election fraud, not following the law is just that. And we have proved through their letters, through their own words, that they advise people, clerks throughout the state of Wisconsin, once again, to not follow the law. That's the violation. Finding more people who've been victimized is relevant, but legally, maybe it's not that important.
So you're saying the WEC violated the law? The
Yes.
Wisconsin election. So
Yes.
wouldn't that be the party that you would recommend charges to the AG?
I mean, a DA can charge, or the Attorney General can charge whomever they see fit. When I was a prosecutor, when the sheriff was an investigator, we worked together. If he sends in a referral on one person, and I make a decision that 5 people did it, guess what? As the prosecutor, I charge all 5. A prosecutor is not bound by the charges that are sent over or what names are on that document. A prosecutor at the county or state level, and most appropriately state level, can make appropriate prosecutorial decisions. I simply I'm a fact finder, okay? I write reports, I talk to people, I document stuff, I get documents, and I send it on. It is up to them to decide. And we're not kicking the can down the road, but we have a criminal justice system. There's police officers, there's prosecutors, there's judges, there's prisons, okay? Everyone has a part to this system, and we're asking for the people next in line to take their part and to do their job.
So are you going to refer the case or send anything to the DA, and when?
We've been in conversations. We will continue to have conversations. I think the sheriff has called for what is much more appropriate, and that being a statewide investigation. The sheriff has offered my documents, my reports to the Attorney General's office. They chose not to accept those reports.
When was that?
That was earlier in the year, say Marchish or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But what, we're extending our offer again. I don't want to speak for you.
Absolutely. We've done it before. The Attorney General, his staff, we spoke with them on a conference line, and we explained the investigation that was unfolding, because I felt, as we are probably all thinking today, that this is going to turn into a statewide investigation, so I wanted to bring them on board early on. I offered all of our investigative reports, that we had nothing to hide. You can have all these reports, take a look at them for your review. I even offered, I think everyone in this room would agree that Sergeant Llewell certainly has some talents here, and is sort of I would call him an expert in what he's accomplished here, but he certainly has done a lot of heavy lifting. And I offered to send him to Madison to assist their investigators to see what we've unfolded and to sort of better explain it. That offer was declined. And they decided they didn't want our investigative reports, that there was nothing to see here. And I think after we watched this today and heard the presentation, I have to believe, it doesn't matter who you vote for, how you vote, or what side of the party line you are, this is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. This is a law that was broken. And everybody who votes ought to feel the pain of that. You want to walk out of that voting booth knowing that your vote counts. And today, I don't feel that, because the law is being snubbed. It's being disregarded.
So as of now, is it fair to say you will not be referring charges or the case to the local DA?
As I mentioned from the beginning, we will always send our investigative reports to our district attorney's office. When that happens, I'll work closely with the lead investigator. I suspect it'll be soon, but we have been working closely with the district attorney. We do have a great working relationship with her. She is aware that we are doing this press conference today, but she has not had a chance to review all of these documents. So in fairness to her and her team, we would like her to have the opportunity to review that. I'm hoping that today this has grabbed the attention of the Attorney General and most likely other individuals around our state, to recognize that we do have a problem on our hands, that the law was in fact violated. You heard it from their own mouth. I mean, we heard those words. There's no doubt in my mind that this occurred. And it is called election fraud. That is the name of the statute. As the sergeant put it, we don't name statutes, okay? That is what it's called. It is clear they violated it. The Attorney General should, in my view, jump on board, ask for our investigative reports, and launch an immediate investigation throughout the entire state.
If his office doesn't,
Yeah, absolutely.
If Josh Call's office doesn't pick it up, or anyone with the DOJ, what are the next steps? Are we gonna just kinda hit a dead, by we, I mean, you guys hit a dead end?
Well, I think we're sort of like repeating ourselves here now. As I mentioned, we're going to give this to our district attorney. We need to let, as the sergeant mentioned, there's an entire process. We have done our part of the process. It is now someone else's line to do that other job.
I
Okay?
think I misphrased my question. So if the DOJ doesn't take it, does anyone else have like a state level authority to investigate this, or is it really just the DOJ?
You know, that would be a great question for our attorney general.
Gotcha.
I have a
So,
question about your actual investigation. Do you have any reason to believe through your investigation that some of these staff were intentionally biasing some of the votes, that they tried to impart what they wanted the person to vote as what they voted? Did you find anything like that?
No, I will tell you that I investigated one care facility, which has 50 to 100 residents. I will submit that Commissioner Spindell is kind of in the Milwaukee area. He has large facilities, and he stated hundreds of ballots are floating around these various facilities. Can I say that someone did or did not? No. Can I say that that seems ripe for a problem? Yeah. I as a voter myself, I don't want ballots floating around willy-nilly in people's hands who are not trained and not qualified. That is bad.
One last question, and we're going to stop for
Thank you,
today.
Sheriff.
Yes, go ahead.
Real quick, Sergeant or Sheriff, have either of you in your reports or your recommendations or referrals, the next election cycle starts in 30 days. If this is not addressed immediately, this is my statement, this is going to happen again in '22. Have either of you made recommendations going, hey, you got to get your foot on the gas pedal, because if this is happening now, has that come up in your recommendations or your thought process or your analysis?
Well, naturally, anytime there's a violation of the law, it grabs our attention. And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this forward to our community. So we do, to your point, someone needs to put their foot on the gas pedal to get the state of Wisconsin to wake up and look at what the WC has done. And we need it to stop. Where does it go from there? These are big decisions that have to be made at big top levels throughout our state. But today is just a stepping stone. We are just one cog in a very, very large wheel.
Thank you, Sheriff.
But I want to say thank you to everyone for coming here today. If you should have some follow-up questions, you know how to get a hold of us. We can certainly entertain those questions at a later date.
Shirley's last
But
name?
No,
Why?
because I want to protect her privacy.
But she's deceased.
Oh, well, no, because that's going to tell you who Judy is.
I mean, if she was.
All I'm naming right now is her
Can you
first
spell
name.
Her first name was Stacy? That's-
Judy or
Sorry, Judy's mother.
Shirley? I believe it's Shirley or Y.
That's what I think it said on there, but I'll
Yeah,
check on this.
yeah, please do.
thank you again for coming.
Thank you.